Franchise Film Review Fridays.
Now we're going to get into Highlander the Gathering.
There can be only one.
This is the
Where it kind of splits.
yeah, we're kind of splitting off now for sure, because up until this point we have stayed primarily in what you would call the Connor MacLeod only kind of Highlander universe. And what we're about to do, we're going into now, they're introducing a brand new character from the same clan, Duncan MacLeod. And the Gathering is the opening of Highlander, the series.
Yeah.
And probably the best, quite possibly the best one of the series.
Yeah.
You know, they opened it up very good. And since you really like the Gathering, I'll let
love the Gathering.
I'll let you go ahead and kind of kick it off.
The Gathering, it opens up with you see Duncan MacLeod and a kid who he eventually starts to mentor Richie.
Yes.
Is breaking into a shop. He thinks Richie's an immortal, but what it is the villain, played by, of all people, Richard Mall, I think that's his name, played Bull from Night Court.
Yeah.
And he, and as lovable as Bull is in Night Court, you hate this character just as much. He played a villain so well.
He played the villain so well, and what's interesting about this villain is he's somewhat reminiscent of the Kurgan.
Yeah,
a little bit, with his sword and his sort of kind of straightforward powering style. And let's touch up just real quick on that. The Immortals, we hadn't talked about this. The reason why, you see, Duncan, every immortal can sense another immortal. Yeah. So when Richie was breaking into his shop, he sensed the presence of another immortal and thought it was Richie. It wasn't him. It was this guy.
Slan Quince is his name.
Yeah, okay. And he sensed him. And
I think I think they did a good job tying both Highlander universes together, because after Slan comes in, you hear that unmistakable growl voice of Connor MacLeod.
Christopher Lambert's voice, he's got one of those voices that's completely unmistakable. There's just some people, and we can even include Sean Connery.
Yeah, you really can.
In the Highlander thing, that the voices are so unmistakably recognizable. You hear that out of the darkness. He comes in and just like, boom.
There's Connor MacLeod.
There's Connor MacLeod.
And I love how they introduce that Connor and Duncan are related, because Connor makes the comment, "I'm Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, same clan, different vintage."
Yeah, different vintage. Yeah.
So because Connor's like 100 years older than Duncan.
He's definitely he's older, and he comes from because at one point in the series later on, it shows how Connor and Duncan kind of came together.
Yeah.
And
they show that in game.
Yeah. Oh, was that in game?
Yeah, that's in game.
Okay.
They show where Connor finds Duncan in a field after he's been mortally wounded.
I thought that was an episode. I was getting that mixed up.
That's an in game.
Okay.
We'll get to that though. I think another cool aspect of the Gathering is the fact that they and unless you watch the series in its entirety, you don't quite pick up on it. They allude to Richie's immortality, because Connor tells Duncan, "You're going to have to watch the boy."
Yeah. So that leads us to because little tidbits and nuggets you'll find throughout the Highlander universe. Before Connor became an immortal officially, the Kurgan who killed Connor and initiated his immortality in the first movie knew that he was an immortal.
Yeah.
So I guess some immortals have the ability, or develop the ability, let's put it that way. They can develop the ability to sense in another immortal who hasn't been turned just yet.
Because if the thing about another legacy of the Immortals is if they don't die at the hands of a violent death, then they'll just simply grow old and die. They'll grow old like a normal person would. But if they suffer the shock of a violent death, then that immortality gets triggered. And apparently that can be, Immortals can sense other Immortals, but apparently Immortals can sense those that haven't even been turned yet.
Right. As is in the sense of the Kurgan and Connor, and now, as we made it to the series, it seems like Connor had sensed that the boy was an Immortal.
But I don't know if Duncan picked up on it.
Apparently that was an ability Duncan had either not been able to develop or gain up until this time.
Yeah.
Because Duncan had not acquired, because he's younger than Connor, hadn't acquired as many quickenings as Connor did. So maybe it just hadn't happened to him
possible.
just yet. So one of the things we can kind of compare and contrast Connor and Duncan between the two. There are elements of as a person, I think I like Duncan more.
Yeah.
As a person, I like Duncan more because he's a little bit more empathetic and sympathetic to people and their needs. Not that Connor isn't, because Connor has shown that.
Yeah.
But Connor's more cold a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
That's just this personality. He's just a little bit sterner, more colder. He's not.
I think that's things he may have picked up on Ramirez, and I think that's things that because he is so old and he's been fighting.
Yeah.
He's probably just developed that personality.
Yeah. And what really hurts.
He's battle hardened.
Yeah, he's battle hardened, and I think really going back to what I said earlier about him being hard hardened by being banished in such a really nasty, violent way because. They were trying to stone him, and they were going to, burn him.
Yeah.
And so, and a fellow clansman finally kind of eased the crowd enough and just sent Connor his own as an act of mercy in a sense, just to save his life.
Yeah.
So, there's reasons why Connor comes across as being really cold and stern at times.
But we're going to skip one just for 1 second. We'll get back to it. But if you fast forward to the source, you'll see that Duncan has developed that.
Yeah.
He's lost that empathy and that ability to care.
It took a lot longer for that to happen, but it just shows that it can happen to even the best of people at times. But we'll touch up on the source in a little bit because Duncan kind of redeems himself a little bit.
So we're going from the Gathering to Highlander Endgame.
There can be only one.
This one
mixed feelings. For me, mixed feelings because as a Highlander fanboy, I liked a lot of elements of it, but I don't know. To me, it just felt like something was missing in a way. I don't know. How do you feel?
I think the thing that's missing in it is you see that Connor has gone from that hardened, heroic, immortal to someone whose spirit has been broken.
Yeah, his spirit's really been broken bad.
I think that's the element that's missing, but I also think that's the element that pushes the story to make Duncan the more heroic of the two.
Yeah. Well, we start out the movie, or maybe not quite start out, but I think it's somewhere close to the beginning, we see where Connor has offered himself up to the Watchers or some kind of group.
Yeah, there's the Watchers. They get introduced in the series.
They basically are keeping a number of Immortals restrained in these, I don't know, almost like casket-like contraptions that are keeping them restrained, where
the sanctuary is what it's called.
And the purpose of it is to keep Immortals alive so nobody wins the prize.
Yeah.
And did you want to talk about the Watchers, which was a very we go back to the series where at the end of season 1 things start to really pick up, and you could say the plot starts to get thick.
Yeah.
The plot thickens a little bit towards the end of season 1. This group of crazy immortal killing people is basically what they seem to be at first, before you find out more details.
The ones that were killing the Immortals in the series, they started out as Watchers.
Right. They became a renegade part of the group.
Because they didn't want someone... They didn't want one person being able to control humanity.
Right.
Which is why they went out and started killing Immortals.
Yeah. So now that we're in a kind of a second Highlander universe with Duncan and Connor now, we find out that the Watchers exist. The Watchers keep watch over the Immortals. They keep records. They track them and everything to that sort. And it just so happens that one of the Watchers is one of the oldest Immortals alive. I thought
Mythos, 5,000 year old
immortal. I just think that's kind of interesting, thing that they put in the series. And I believe it's season 2 when Joe Dawson is introduced.
Yeah.
Joe Dawson becomes, you could say Joe Dawson breaks Watcher protocol by engaging in friendship and actually being open about this secret society that watches the Immortals and tracks their every move. And he gives the lowdown on who killed Darius and all that stuff. Darius was a
friend of Duncan's.
Yeah, Darius was an Immortal introduced in season 1 who became a friend of Duncan's, who, interesting enough, I like him because he was a conqueror who tried to conquer the world.
Yeah, they said he was like one of the most vicious Immortals ever.
Yeah, he really was one of and tried to conquer the world. He has a serious change of heart and basically becomes a monk.
Yeah.
And basically, he goes from a man of war to a man of
God.
a man of God, a man of peace, And I love the demographic of that, I love how that they do that. So it's a good element they introduced in the story. And you want to elaborate any more on that?
No, we need to get. We veered off track. We gotta get back.
We got to veer back. Yeah.
But Endgame, I think, is a good point where it ties the first set of movies and then the Gathering and the television show back together.
Yeah.
Because you have a big gap from the movies between Part 3 and then Endgame. You have a massive gap there. But the series, Highlander ran with like 6 seasons.
Yes.
So,
Highlander,
you still had that going. But then they get into Endgame, which ties it all together. Now, as we were saying, Connor, he's broken, and the villain has throughout time been going through and killing people that Connor cares about, to the point where the only person left alive that Connor gives a damn about is Duncan.
Yeah.
Which leads to probably one of the most heart-wrenching moments in the entire Highlander franchise, the fight between Duncan and Connor.
Yeah. Up until this point, the villain in Highlander Endgame is a villain named Jacob Kell, who, like he said, has been tormenting and torturing Connor through the centuries. And one of the things they elaborate in this movie, which I like, is the numbers of quickenings that the Immortals have.
Yeah.
Duncan had 170-something quickenings. Connor had 260-something quickenings. Jacob Kell, if I remember correctly, had over 600 quickenings, making him quite possibly the most powerful immortal, at least that we know of up until this point, because he had so many quickenings.
And even with Mythos being over 5,000 years old, he didn't have that many because he took himself out of the game.
Yeah. Mythos being over 5,000 years old, very wise and knowledgeable, but he took himself out of, like you said, he took himself out of the game, so he didn't even have that many quickenings. Because Jacob Kell was purposely going around trying to get as many quickenings as he possibly could, because he obviously
eventually he knew he was going to have to face Duncan.
Yeah.
Or face Connor.
Yeah.
Or at least so we thought.
Yeah. And which brings, we go right back to what you're saying about the most heart-wrenching moment, which is why I wanted to elaborate on the quickenings real quick. Connor initiates this fight. Duncan doesn't want to do this.
Duncan refuses.
Duncan basically refused to do it, but Connor just kept pushing him. And the reason why Connor kept pushing him was because they knew that one of them had to absorb the quickening. Connor knew that one of them needed the quickening of the other in order to overcome Jacob Kell, because he had become so powerful. And so, like it really is a heart-wrenching kind of thing. But Duncan and Connor engage in a very well
choreographed fight.
Very well done sword fight. with Duncan MacLeod using the technique that he had learned from Connor centuries ago, a special sword technique that they had learned, or Duncan had been taught by him, and he took Connor's head, absorbed his quickening, giving him enough power to be able to go head to head with Jacob Kell.
I think this movie didn't make very much at the box office. I think it only made like $12 million. It was a complete flop.
Yeah.
But I love this movie. And I remember going to the movies and watching this one. And when I realized what was going to happen, these two are fighting. I'm screaming at the screen to not let this happen, because I'm a Highlander fanboy. I like the movies. I like the show. And I'm thinking, like, this can't happen!
I know.
And then you get to that moment where you see the inevitable.
Yeah.
And this is where I truly believe Adrian Paul, he plays Duncan. I truly believe Adrian, his acting is so perfect.
Yeah, it really
because
was
when they're
good.
in that position and he's about to have to take Connor's head,
yeah,
the look on his face, and you can literally see it in his eyes. He's almost begging Connor not to make him do this.
Yes.
Until he finally realizes it's inevitable, and they say their goodbyes, and then.
If I was writing this movie, I would have done this. Since Jacob Kell and his posse or gang were breaking the rules of the game, because Jacob Kell was going on holy ground killing people.
Yeah. Which is where the sanctuary was.
Yeah, that's where the sanctuary was. Yeah, he actually went to the sanctuary and killed everybody but Connor.
But Connor, yeah.
Because he wanted to face Connor in combat. And torture him some more, obviously.
Obviously.
I would have initiated an iconic 2-on-1 fight with Connor and Duncan beating the hell out of Jacob Kell in a fierce 2-on-1 sword fight of all time. That's what I would have done. I would have done something in the story where if he's breaking the rules, forget the rules now.
Yeah.
I mean, who cares?
If he can go through and he can behead unarmed immortals on holy ground, which is another one of the rules, is you can't behead an unarmed immortal, and you definitely can't fight on holy ground.
Right. Holy ground is that that's one of the
sacred.
It's sacred. It's a you're protected, and immortals have found themselves. When we get to the animated movie, that plays a big part. Holy ground is so sacred, and so you don't engage. You can go on holy ground and talk, but you can't fight. Just like in the first movie, there was a scene where Connor's in the church. Not to deviate too much, but the Kurgan comes in, and his crazy self is sit down, and it's actually quite funny, him acting stupid in the church, but they don't fight each other. They're just sitting there mouthing off to each other, and the Kurgan's there to taunt him, and so. But
Connor came very close to breaking that rule. He did.
He came. Yeah, he started coming close there, because it was a touchy subject.
Yeah.
Because the Kurgan wound up. He thought he had raped the woman of Ramirez. In fact, it was Connor's wife.
Yeah.
So that was a touchy thing that he almost broke. But getting back to Endgame, that's if I was to change the story, that's what I would have done, and that would have kept Connor alive. And what I would do, just to top it off, I would have had a split quickening. I would have had Duncan and Connor behead Jacob Kell somewhere in the fight at the same time with a split quickening.
That would have been interesting. That would definitely.
I would have had a split quick. This is the kind of stuff. Being a writer, I can. I've had this.
You can see that.
I could see things happening, and I have said a number of times, with a lot of movies that come out in the past several years, they should have gotten me to write it. Because there's been so many movies that have flopped. But I saw potential in those storylines. Yeah. I could have turned it around, or at least helped turn it around to where the movie would have been better.
Yeah.
And the fact that one of the McLeods had to die was a big downer.
I think they did that. I think it had to be one of those moments where you have to experience such heartache to become the hero.
Yeah.
I honestly think that's the angle they were going for, which is why Connor. His spirit was so broken. It was almost like he was ready to die.
Yeah.
But he wasn't going to kill himself.
Right. Yeah. That's a very good point. He
But
like he wanted Duncan to end him.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
He was ready. He knew Duncan would benefit from it. And and on Duncan's side of it, he has to experience that tragedy to make that last heroic effort.
Yeah.
Because with the final fight scene between Kel and Duncan, it's not a matter of survival for him. It really becomes a matter of revenge.
Yeah.
Because he pushed Kel to make Connor make that decision.
Yeah.
So in essence, he's blaming Jacob Kell for what happened, and now it's a matter of revenge, not necessarily survival.
Up until this point, Duncan MacLeod never heard of Jacob Kell, but because of all the drama that existed between Kell and Connor through the years, now Duncan has obviously become involved in it, and like you said, now he wants vengeance on Jacob Kell to redeem, to put it, to get for Connor MacLeod, so.
So I think we pretty much covered Endgame extensively.
Yeah, Endgame pretty, because this was the first movie this was the first Highlander movie that actually had the two major MacLeods, Connor and now Duncan. This was the first movie that actually put Duncan in.
Yeah.
I mean, The Gathering was kind of like a TV movie.
Yeah, it was actually the pilot episode of the series.
It was the pilot episode of the series. So, but it was kind of. It was almost the length of a movie.
Yeah, I think it was about an hour and a half.
Yeah, hour and a half. So, but this was the first major motion picture Highlander movie that Duncan was in.